Ladies and gentlemen, now we are going to begin an interview with His Excellency the Prime Minister. We will ask one question each, perhaps, as the moderators here. Later on, we will turn to you and we will invite you to ask the questions that you may have thought of asking when His Excellency the Prime Minister was delivering his lecture, and also upon the explanation that he's going to make during the interview. Erna, would you like to begin with any question if you have?
Thank you. Mr. Prime Minister, I think you are an elected Secretary General of the Nordic Council as a former Prime Minister of a small but a great country. Iceland is a big country with a rather small amount of people and a small population, but with the highest percentage of philharmonic orchestras per capita, and with the European-wide best system of music education. The system of libraries in Iceland is quite outstanding, and the amount of books read by the individuals is quite amazing. So your action in the Nordic Council is heading the gathering of the most international cooperation between governments. How do you feel that cultural diplomacy can make the shift from this very modern institution worldwide, and how cultural diplomacy can be promoted in the sense you already did it and achieved it?
Well, I'm not sure that everything you said is quite right. I think maybe you're saying too much about us, but cultural diplomacy is and has always been important between the Nordic countries in the beginning. We have had great interactions, and all the way from the Icelandic sagas, when the poets were visiting the kings and so on, it was always used, they used always cultural diplomacy, opening the hearts of the kings by bringing them poets and so on. So this has always been important in our culture. How that can be utilized internationally, I think we have tried to do our best. The Nordic countries have been very active in the United Nations systems, and we have tried our best to utilize this there. And we have also strong cooperation between our foreign services. So I think there are many good examples of utilizing cultural diplomacy from the Nordic countries. But on the other hand, we are very homogeneous societies. And I don't know if we can teach others so much on multicultural issues. But on the other hand, we are facing this more and more self, and we are trying to deal with it. And we are trying to use our own culture and experience in dealing with that. But we are not doing that without difficulties, I must confess.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask a question regarding the European Union membership and the Nordic countries. Some are already part of the European Union, some are not. But you emphasized a lot during your presentation to the similarities and to the coordination of action between these countries, cooperation between the foreign ministries you mentioned already now. How do you see this process of coming closer among the countries of the Nordic Council on the one hand, plus the fact that some of the Nordic countries are not part of the European Union, and this process of the integration to the European Union, how would it affect? Do you foresee, do you envisage in the future all of the Nordic countries becoming member of the European Union, or distancing themselves from the European Union, following, for instance, the example of Norway?
And all the Nordic countries are participating in European cooperation. We must keep in mind that all the Nordic countries are members of Schengen, and Norway and Iceland are members of the European Economic Area. So in that respect, both Norway and Iceland are members of the internal market. And they are members of the research and the educational programs and so on. So Norway and Iceland are participating very much in the broader European cooperation. Then it comes the next question: if they are so close to the European Union and European cooperation, why don't they become members of the European Union? Well, that is a rather complicated question, and they have, both Norway and Iceland have a lot of very independent people, and it was one said it was a visitor that came to Iceland, they have no king, but they are all kings. That tells something about the Icelanders. But I think this is a question of time, and it will of course be very important to see how the European Union will go forward. What will happen with Britain, and how will the European Union solve the challenges they are heading now? And in the long, yes, Euro crisis, the economic crisis. And Iceland has asked for membership, and they are negotiating membership, but there is not enough political support now in Iceland for membership, in my view. But I think in the future Iceland will become a member, and I think that will happen with Norway as well. But when that will happen, I can't answer.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for your talk, which took us into travel around the Nordic region. I have a question, because you talked about the value, the unity, the importance, and the synergy within which the Nordic countries work together. I would like to know what is the importance of a common culture, common Nordic culture to the European Union. You talked about the Nordic culture, but I would like to know what added value does the Nordic culture add to the European Union on one side, and also what do you think would be the future of cultural diplomacy first of all, vis-à-vis the Nordic countries, and also for the integration of the Nordic countries within Europe. Do you think that the integration ever of Nordic countries within Europe would be an asset or a barrier?
I cannot see it will be a barrier. But of course every culture is important to Europe, and the Nordic culture as well. The Nordic culture is old and has influenced a lot in other parts of Europe. If we look to the Vikings, to the sagas, the literature, the Icelandic literature has influenced here in Germany. In music, you can look to Wagner, and so this culture has had a lot of influence in other parts of Europe, and this is a culture that is very dear to us. I was reading 2 days ago that English is one of the Scandinavian languages. And maybe you can say that there's a lot of influence in the English language from the old Icelandic language. So you see a lot of common identities and values in this old culture of the Vikings. And the Vikings were traveling all over Europe. They were traveling all the way down to Istanbul and through the rivers in Russia. Yes, and so this is an important culture, not only to the Nordic countries but to the whole of Europe. And I think I would answer in that way, but it will never be a barrier.
Thank you very much. Now I turn to the audience to ask the question. Let's begin with His Excellency the Minister.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I think you answered part of the question I asked. Basically, the focus is my question is on the financial crisis. How the financial crisis has affected the unity of the Nordic countries. I know there is a big culture, sort of structural problem, intensity of the but how the financial crisis has really affected this unity. Is it fragmented in a way, or how brought together?
Well, the financial crisis has, of course, influenced the Nordic countries like the rest of Europe. Europe is the biggest market for the Nordic countries, and therefore it is very important for them what is happening in Europe. But this is, of course, a little bit different. Norway is a very rich country, and the national product of Norway is almost as high as of Sweden today because of the oil. One could say that Sweden and Finland are doing well. They had a bank crisis in the 90s, and actually Norway as well, and they learned a lot from these financial crises they had in the 90s. So I would say that they were better prepared for this new crisis than many others. Unemployment is rising in Denmark, and the financial crisis has hit Denmark more, I would say, than some of the other Nordic countries. But Germany is very important to Denmark, and it will be very important what will happen in the economy in Germany. Until now, it has been functioning very well. Iceland is a special case. It has been a lot of difficulties in Iceland. One of the major factors is that the Icelandic krona is a very small currency, and running a small currency in an open economy is not very easy. Mr. Soros devaluated the British pound, and he devaluated also the Swedish krona. And a very small bank in Germany will not have any problems in playing with the Icelandic krona. And so this is one of the challenges we are facing. We have 5 small Nordic countries with 5 different currencies. 4 kronas, and one of the Nordic countries, Finland, has the euro. So this is in a way rather strange, because we like to cooperate on everything.
Thank you very much. There was another person who wanted to take the floor here. I don't see any. Do you want to ask yourself? Yeah, okay, fine. Now you have the microphone, so use it.
My name is Halldór, and I am a Swedish student originally from Latvia. Last semester I also spent in Oslo as Nordic student, so I experienced Nordic culture and also Nordic cooperation. What I would like to ask, do you see some perspectives for Nordic culture and Nordic dimension in general to spread also from Scandinavia? Because of course Scandinavia is really integrated regionally, but do you see some perspective to integrating also Baltic states or maybe Northwest Russia, or it's mostly just regional cooperation, some small project, but not spreading culture?
Well, I don't think we should have any imperialist view on this. I can remember that there was a countryman of mine who went to Alaska in the beginnings of the 1860s, and he was actually supported by, I think it was President Grant of the United States, by sailing with a warship from San Francisco up to Alaska. And he wrote home, and he said, "We will never be independent in Iceland, forget it. I need 10,000 people to come to Alaska, and we will establish a new Iceland in Alaska. And we can put it into law that you have to speak Icelandic to be able to vote, and by that we will take over the country, we will take over Alaska." And as you know, people living in the north are stronger than those living in the south. So step by step we can take over whole of America. I don't think we should have such imperialistic views on what we can do. There were Icelanders first to find America. Leif Erikson was the first, but he sailed back because we have the experience that the Icelanders always go home. They return. And actually I'm returning to Iceland from Denmark next year. Well, we can have certain influence. And we have good cooperation with the civil society actually in Russia. We have small offices in Murmansk, in Petrozavodsk, in Arkhangelsk. I have been to all of these areas. And we are promoting people-to-people contacts. And I think we can have a positive influence on Russian society by doing that. But as Nordic Council of Ministers, yes. And of course we have had that cooperation in your country, in Latvia. And actually our director to our Latvian office is the first ambassador of Latvia in Sweden. He was a fugitive from Latvia to Sweden and returned back. And we have a lot of cultural cooperation with the Baltic countries, and I have to say that I don't think that the Baltic countries have done so well without strong Nordic cooperation. I think that has been very important for the Baltic countries, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, to have strong cooperation with the Nordic countries in their new democracy. They became independent again only 20 years ago. It took a lot of efforts to build up these societies, and I think the Nordic cooperation has been very important, and I think there is a lack of such regional cooperation down in the Balkans. So I think it would be another situation down in the Balkans if they could enjoy the same kind of close regional cooperation.
Thank you very much. I have another question, Mr. Prime Minister. You mentioned that there were already 8 languages spoken in the area of the Nordic Council. Coming back to the main subject of this institute, which is cultural diplomacy and multiculturalism, how do you see this variety of languages make the people of the region, whether it makes it more open to other cultures, or they develop something common in between themselves which is different from the European culture or the Southern or Central European or European Union culture, if you may call it that way?
Well, language is very important in communication, as we all now know. And it is very important, for example, in Iceland, that we try to get the young people to learn some of the Scandinavian languages, mostly Danish. And Finland is fighting to try to get the young people to learn Swedish. I'm sorry to say that we are going back, and the young people are asking more and more, why on earth do we have to learn Swedish or Danish? Isn't it enough to learn English? In the Nordic cooperation, we use the three Scandinavian languages. That's our official languages: Swedish, Danish, and Norwegian. So in my office, we are using these three languages. We are not using Finnish or Icelandic. So we, coming from Iceland, we have to learn one of these languages, and the Finnish are usually speaking Swedish. But more and more, in some meetings, people are going over to English. So this is one of our cultural problems we are facing, that is with languages. Then we have the language of the Sami people, then we have Greenlandish, which is very different, and the Faroe Islands has also a special language. But this is a part of our richness, I would say, and it's because of that we have this rich literature. Without all these languages, we would not have the same richness in literature. So that is a richness in my view, but we have to try to cope with this.
Thank you very much. If there is no other question, our next speaker is here, so that, well, okay, there's a question, please.
Thank you. I'm the advisor of the Kurdistan Regional Government in Iraq. Your Excellency, I'd like to add something that Iceland is quite famous to my country. Last year we received about 10 companies from Iceland, and they have registered their companies in my country. So at that time there was working problem, and so they were very satisfied with the relations that we have with both countries. It was only to say that Iceland is very famous to the Middle East, my country, and we congratulate you to the very successful marketing the business outside the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have to congratulate both Kurdistan region of Iraq and also Iceland for opening up and establishing relations, because if you ask the man in the street to show on the map where is northern Kurdistan, northern Iraq, Kurdistan, and or Iceland, they will not be able to see. But the businessmen, like the bees, as we call in Turkey, if there is honey somewhere, they will find it without you showing them where honey could be found.
Well, I just wanted to respond very shortly that usually volcanoes and earthquakes are something very negative, but they have also a very positive side, and that is there would be no geothermal power without volcanic activities and earthquakes, because the earthquakes, they create new cracks and new geothermal energy. So this is the positive side of earthquakes. We should always bear in mind that everything has also a positive side.
Thank you very much. Are there other questions? No. Mark, could we perhaps close this part and go to Mrs. Diamantopoulos? Thank you very much. I would like to thank on your behalf His Excellency Mr. Prime Minister. Thank you very much for your contribution and very cooperation to answer all the questions. Please join me to thank His Excellency the Prime Minister.